Today, we are going to be covering our type 8, striving to feel powerful. Sometimes in various Enneagram textbooks, you'll see them referred to as the challenger, sometimes the rebel or the maverick. According to the awareness to action framework, they are striving to feel powerful, and sometimes people have a little bit of an adverse reaction, I think, to that idea that, like, oh, I'm striving to feel powerful. I don't know if that is accurate. But the way that the awareness to action team will talk about it is that it's not about necessarily just needing, all of this power to control other people and rule the world, but it's more about the power to produce a result. And that makes sense when I've read about, when you probably have read about other Enneagram frameworks theories. They will talk about the type A as having the most energy out of all the types on the out of the 9 types. And so that makes sense. The power to produce a result. They have a lot of passion. They do have a lot of energy. They have a lot of not a lot of overthinking, and just a lot of ability to know exactly what needs to be done, and a lot of power to make things happen. So they do have big ideas, and unlike maybe some of the other types, they are really clear about what needs to happen to move that idea into execution. So these are, like every single type, we need this energy on a team. Uh, if you are one, I'm hoping that you get something out of today. And if you are not one, you most likely are working with one. And you might even be reporting to one. Type 8, any type can be powerful, influential leaders in their own ways. Type 8s, a lot of times they'll talk about, they just tend to have natural leadership tendencies. Where you will find them a lot of times on leadership teams, directors, VPs. And so in a lot of the organizations that Enneagram MBA has worked with over the years, there's always a handful of type 8s when we do the leadership team mapping. And again, that makes sense, especially with a lot of the qualities being those qualities that we do tend to just kind of default appreciate or recognize as strong leadership skills: the decisiveness, the directness, the confidence. We'll talk more about that. So that makes sense that many of them would be in leadership positions. So we're going to talk about it though. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. I did want to share, we are planning for a large conference event here in a couple of weeks down in Texas, and it's a 300 plus person event. And we are bringing an introduction to the Enneagram to the group with a really fun breakout activity to get people kind of networking and talking, and hopefully inspire conversations beyond the conference into the happy hour dinner kind of post formal event. And this is such a fun way, and obviously I am biased, so you'll have to take this with a grain of salt, but this is one of the most fun ways to bring in the Enneagram to a professional setting, is with these conference events. So it's a little bit different than bringing it to your team. Those groups tend to be, 7 people, 17 people, maybe 30 people, maybe even 50. But when you're doing the whole department, these events obviously are much larger, so you don't know 300 people super intimately, but it's such a great way to open the door for conversation, to add some fun, to give people some things to talk about beyond just, where are you from? What do you do? And so I'm going to invite you to check out some of our Enneagram conference event options over at enneagramMBA.com. If you happen to have an industry conference, maybe your whole organization does some sort of conference. We've done that with other teams where it's just a little bit larger of an event. So the activities, the way we talk about it is just a little bit different so that we are meeting the needs of those types of dynamics. So wanted to share that with you. Let's get into it, shall we? Okay, so we talked about our type 8 striving to feel powerful. Sometimes they're called the challenger, the protector. Their leadership style, according to the awareness to action framework, is known as the commander. We'll talk a little bit more about why that is. And then they are not driven by control. Okay, I think this is a misconception that we want to just kind of nip in the butt right away. They're not control freaks. They don't have to have control over everything. What they do appreciate and are driven by is autonomy, impact, and protecting themselves from vulnerability, and then also protecting the people that they care about. And so you'll see that it kind of framed at times that they are moving towards that power, control, autonomy, and then are kind of pushing away anything that could put them in a vulnerable position. And that also includes their team. So they can be fiercely protective of those people in their inner circle. And it takes a while to get into the inner circle. But once you're there, these people are kind of your ride or die. They have your back. You might duke it out behind closed doors, but when it comes to kind of having a united front, maybe with another department or against a particular problem, whatever it might be, the type 8, they got you. They got your back. You can count on them. Now, they have a desire. We talked about that autonomy to feel self-directed. They want to feel capable and in control of their own path, their own destiny, their own kind of path forward, I guess. They don't want anybody to tell them what to do. They want to avoid vulnerability, anything that could make them seem weak, or anything that would allow others to have control over them. Now, this doesn't mean that they can't be led, that they can't be great direct reports. Many 8s will say, I don't mind being led, and sometimes I prefer it. Sometimes I don't always necessarily want to be in charge. It's just I have to respect the person that is leading me, and I have to trust that they are making good decisions, that they are taking care of the group. And then sometimes nobody else is willing to step up. And so I feel like it's my job to step up and take the lead in certain situations. But that doesn't mean I'm a control freak, that I always have to be in charge. I have heard that feedback multiple times from various type 8s. So they can make really great leaders, but they can also make great teammates that follow as well. They want to, or I should say, they value the truth, they value action taking, and they value strength. So if you happen to not be an 8, but you're working with an 8, these are really important things to keep in mind. These are things that the Enneagram literature will tell us in theory, but these are things that I have also heard in real life, that truth telling, that coming to the table with some sort of idea to correct a problem, to jump into action versus just bringing problems only. And then they will say, yeah, if I smell weakness, I'm going to have a hard time with respecting that person, listening to that person. And so just some things to keep in mind. Now, of course, our type 8s might need some perspective expansion around some of that, but just know that those things are highly valued and important to your type 8. And so there might be some things you need to tweak in your communication or your approach to have a better relationship, be a little bit more influential, get along better, etc. So our type 8s do want to know who's in charge. Is this fair? Who needs protection here? And if nobody is protecting, if it's not fair, if nobody, it's not clear who's in charge, I'm going to step up. I'm going to step up rather than just sit back and see what happens. It's like, okay, I guess it's me. In the workplace, some of their strengths include being direct, confident, and decisive. They are willing to take risks and make hard calls. They are in the assertive stance, which is another type of Enneagram framework out there. It's kind of the traditional way that they talk about it, where our 3s, our 7s, and our 8s are in that assertive stance, where it's how they approach kind of taking action or starting things is this: I want to go far and I want to go fast and leap and the net will appear kind of thing. So 3, 7s, 8s, very much in that. And they kind of have, because they have that confidence that, you know what, I might make a mistake. I may not know what step 2 or 3 is, but let me at least get started with step 1, and I know that I'll figure it out. So they don't spend a ton of time overthinking. That's not to think that 8s never overthink, but most of the time it's let's just get the ball rolling and then we can kind of figure it out along the way. So you can kind of see right away that if they are working with somebody like we've talked about, our type 6s, or maybe a little bit like our type 1s or 5s, where it's, hey, let's slow this down a little bit and review the needs to make sure that we have everything in place. Have we thought about contingency plans? Have we thought about our risks? Are we prepared for those risks? That is also incredibly important. Sometimes, though, you just need to jump in, right? So it's not one way or the other is best. It's very situational. But you could kind of see where those types of personalities might butt heads a little bit, might have some friction in the workplace. They are natural protectors of people and of values. And then they bring a ton of momentum. They bring a ton of clarity, especially in high pressure situations. These are not the type to back down from a challenge. I think it's also a little bit of a misconception that type 8s are going around looking for a fight. I think most are not, but they most definitely will not back down from one. Now, when these strengths are overused, it might that passion, that energy, that intensity might feel a little overwhelming to other people. Where an 8 might say, "Oh, I was just being passionate." Somebody else might experience it as, "Oh, really? I thought you were angry," or "Wow, this is just really intense." And so again, that doesn't make an 8 wrong. It doesn't make the person on the receiving end wrong. It's just something to be aware of. So sometimes that intensity can feel overwhelming to others. Sometimes moving too fast, they can move too fast and kind of forget about others, not bring others along. And this is something that some type 2s, in various workshops have kind of talked about that dynamic with the type 8 teammate or the type 8 leader, saying things like, or this could be a 2 or a 9, or a 6 even, but where it's like, well, wait a minute. Have we thought about how this is going to impact the rest of the team? Like, love that we're doing this, but now everybody's going to have to stay an extra 2 hours. Everybody's going to have to work on, New Year's Eve, or, wait a minute, this might negatively impact, coworker Tommy or whatever. Other people might have thoughts about how it's going to impact the team and make sure everybody else is coming along, where an 8 has a tendency just to start just start driving forward. Come, come along. I trust that you guys are going to hop on the bus, but I'm not going to do a head count. Whereas there's other types that might be a little bit more apt to do, like, let's make sure we're all here. Let's make sure we're all good. We got the water, we got the snacks. Type eight's like, jump on, we're going. Um, let's see. Something else I had on here is sometimes they might assume that there is opposition or somebody is, I don't know, kind of challenging their direction or their opinion or whatever it is they're saying. And sometimes it might just be like our type sixes, for example, it just might be asking clarifying questions. Or eights aren't, they don't have a reputation for giving, the detailed rundown. It's more like big picture, let's go, figure it out along the way. And so some people might have some questions, and some of those questions might seem like maybe you're being confrontational, maybe you're being pessimistic, maybe you're not being a team player. So that'll be something for our type eights just to think about. Are they really opposing, or are they just asking questions? Are they just needing some clarification? Are they just wanting a little bit more information? So thinking about that can help. And then this makes sense. This last one absolutely makes sense, where they might struggle to show any type of vulnerability. That is one of their core avoidance um, things that they want to avoid the most. And so they may not ask for help when they really need it. And so be aware of that as a type 8, and knowing that just because you need help doesn't necessarily mean that you're weak and that you can't figure it out, right? We all need help. So kind of reframing your thoughts on that. How the type 8 shows up at work, their working style tends to be very action oriented, very results driven. So I think as I go through this list, if you're an 8 listening, you're going to probably be like, yep, yep, yep. And then if you are working with an 8 or have an 8 in your life, these are really important things to pay attention to, because these might be a little bit different than your working style, most likely will be. But if you want to have a good relationship, like all of these that we have talked about, it's important to understand kind of how they see the world, their perspective, what they value and prioritize. And so type 8s really value and prioritize results and action. They prefer autonomy and authority over micromanagement. And so that goes both ways, both how they want to be led and managed, and then most likely how they are going to lead and manage you. They're kind of going to have, very similar to what I think a type 5 or a type 7 might be, a type leadership style, where it's like, here's the big picture. I trust that you'll get there, or just here's what needs to be done. Here's the goal. I trust that you're capable enough to get it done, figure it out on your own. Which again, sometimes we might need more details. So you might have to ask some questions to that type 8 teammate, and type 8s, understanding that sometimes that's possible, that people are going to need a little bit more. They are going to speak directly, concisely, and they expect kind of the same in return, especially around that honesty, that truth-telling piece. And what I hear from 8s is, they will say, listen, sometimes I do need some more details. Sometimes I do need to understand the backstory before I can make a decision, or before, I'm ready to move forward. But what I really appreciate, though, is if you start with, the thing that you need, and then let me ask questions. So don't do the backstory, don't explain it, and then ask the question. They will say, just ask the question. And then if I don't understand it, if I need more information, then I will ask you, and you can give all of that. And so, something to keep in mind working with our type 8s. And then they are sometimes known as a maverick. On our type 8, mugs that we have, and I was thinking I had one around here, but it says rebel with a cause on one of the sides. And it is because they do, and they have the confidence to challenge systems, rules, and even leaders that don't feel efficient or especially that feel unjust. And so that is where that nickname comes from because they are absolutely okay with questioning authority, a little bit like our sixes. And I think this is one of the ways that our sixes and eights overlap. Sometimes it's like these two cannot be more different, and other times it's like, wow, there are several similarities, and this is absolutely one of them. That kind of questioning, that inner BS meter. I mentioned earlier their leadership style is known as the commander. This means that they lead from the front with confidence and conviction. They protect the team and will remove any obstacles, challenges, kind of bust through doors. What do we need to do to keep this momentum going? They create a lot of clarity in chaos and can really drive action, execution. And so they just kind of they know what needs to be done. They don't need to go back and typically make a pros and cons list. They don't typically need to think about it for several days. Most of the time, it's like, okay, yep, this is what we need to do. Yes, no, right, left, tomorrow, next month. They just tend to have a little bit more. I don't know if it's faster processing, but just more clarity on what needs to be done, and they can kind of give that to the rest of the team who might feel a little unsure, especially in stress, chaos, times of change. Eights are incredible leaders. And then one of their challenges as a leader can be unintentionally dominating conversations or dominating decisions. And so one of the things, and this is, I think, especially helpful for our type 8 leaders or team members who are looking to move into leadership, is to let everybody else speak. I think this was a Jeff Bezos tip that I read several years ago. You might have heard the same thing, where he doesn't want the conversation to be influenced by his opinion. He wants to hear everybody's honest thoughts, get everybody's honest feedback, allow for some, crazy ideas, left field opinions. And then at the end, he'll kind of come in and share his thoughts. But at that point, he's gotten to hear from everybody on the team kind of in an unfiltered way. And so I think our type 8s have an opportunity to do that as well, is just to kind of sit back and let everybody else have a chance to share or speak up. And then you go behind them and then you share yours. Pet peeves and preferences in the workplace for our type 8s. It's no surprise here, very similar to the 7, where it's being controlled or micromanaged. I don't think anybody loves that. It is incredibly frustrating to a type 8 who values that autonomy so, so much. They cannot stand passive aggressive communication. It's like, just say it, right? Just tell me what's on your mind. Tell me what's wrong. Tell me why you're upset. I know something's going on, and it can be such a pet peeve to feel like they have to pull it because they feel like, well, I'm so good about communicating clearly and directly. I expect that from you. It is a pet peeve to have a lack of transparency or hidden agendas. And this is sometimes where a type like the type 3 and 8, who do have so much in common, might have a point of friction, because our type 3s are really good at kind of spinning to make themselves look good, to make the team look good, the data look good. They might have a little bit of a hidden agenda in that, okay, I'm going to be this person here and then this person. And then, and so sometimes 3s can feel to others, and I don't think 3s would ever say this about themselves, but to others, a little inauthentic, or what's the real story? And so that can be some friction between our 3s and our 8s sometimes. But again, many times, most of the time, they make such great teammates. And then it is a huge pet peeve to be led by somebody that they believe is weak or somebody who is indecisive to be led by them or really to work next to them. It's going to be a difficult work relationship. What they do prefer in the workplace is straightforward communication, clear authority and decision rights for themselves as much as possible. They appreciate mutual trust, mutual respect. And I think it would be interesting to ask the question to your 8 teammate, what do you see as respectful behavior, respectful communication, respectful relationships, and what do you see as being disrespectful? What creates trust? What deteriorates trust? Because yes, we can say mutual trust and respect is important, but what exactly is that? Because we might have our own definition of that, but somebody else might have something very different. And I think this goes not just for eights, but anybody when we're talking about what we prefer or what frustrates us, it's important to go that level deeper and ask kind of, well, what does weak leadership look like to you? What does strong leadership look like to you? Because that is very kind of person specific based on their own experiences, perspective of the world. The Enneagram can give us some insight, but getting down to those nitty gritty details is a conversation. Let's see. And then the last preference I have here is leaders and teammates who can hold their own. So really just kind of the opposite of all the pet peeves. They may not agree with you in a meeting and you might kind of duke it out, kind of toe to toe, go at it at each other in a meeting. And they might still not agree with you. You might leave that meeting thinking, oh man, they hate me. We're having, now we have this damaged relationship. But I think a lot of times eights are not thinking that. They're thinking, I don't agree with them, but I respect them for speaking up. I respect them for, challenging me on it. They may not like it in that exact moment, but looking back on it, they're going to respect that person so much more for their honesty and for the courage to share the truth. Now, when you're giving feedback to a type 8, a lot of this is okay, and this makes sense. So you want to be direct, you want to be honest, and you want to be confident in how you are delivering it. Again, for all the reasons that we have talked about, I think that makes a lot of sense. Don't soften the feedback to the point that it's unclear or confusing or vague. This is not the type of person that you need to do the sandwich method with. Just say, hey, this is the challenge. This is the issue. Just put it out there. The eights might have something to say about it, most likely, but you got to give it to them straight, even if it feels weird. And this is where, the 2, the 9, maybe even the 7, it can be weird to give, what they might perceive as negative feedback so harshly. And I'm doing the quotes again for harshly. Whereas an 8 might just see it as, well, you're just telling, you're just giving it to me like it is. And I appreciate that. And I need that. Don't soften it. And then it kind of goes both ways. So be ready for that direct, feedback from them. You want to make sure that you're focused on the impact and the outcomes, and then just, address issues head on. You don't need to, wait for the twice a year feedback time. Just, go ahead and say something. They're going to really appreciate it. They're going to be able to trust you more. Again, even if they don't like everything that you say, the more that you are honest, the more trust that builds. Now, some things for 8s to think about when they're receiving feedback. One thing I have here is to pause before reacting, because you probably are going to have an initial reaction of, no, I don't. Well, that's a you problem, right? So just before you say anything, just kind of channel your connecting point to the type 5 and just kind of slow it down. Just sit with it for a minute, be a little thoughtful before you make that initial response. Listen for the care, the intention behind the message, behind the feedback, because most people are sharing feedback, and I think this is one that all of us can remember. Is it can feel like a little bit of an attack, or um, they're beating up on me, or they don't appreciate this. This is just how I am. But understand, okay, there's some, most likely some level of care that is underneath this message, because they care about my development, because they care about my career growth, because they care about the relationship between the two of us, whatever that might be. And then, understand and look for opportunities in those feedback moments to maybe share if you're struggling with something, to ask for help, and understand that, vulnerability builds trust, not weakness. Now, we have talked about the 3 flavors with each of these 9 types. And we're going to do the same for our type 8s. We're going to overlay the preserving instinctual bias, the navigating instinctual bias, and the transmitting instinctual bias. Our preservers are really focused on preserving not just themselves with their own health and wellness and nest and resources, but also preserving and thinking about those things for the team, the people in their life, the organization in their life. Navigating is going to be a little bit more focused on group dynamics, understanding hierarchy, role clarity, information sharing. And then our transmitters are really focused on leaving a legacy, maybe going deep with somebody for a moment and then backing out, and kind of broadcasting, narrowcasting dynamic is with that one. Being kind of bold is a characteristic of our transmitting type. So you can already kind of start to see, like, ooh, a transmitter overlaid with a type 8. That's a strong type 8. So we'll get to that in just a second. So let's talk about preserving 8s. These are going to be the more, maybe a little bit more quieter, a little bit more like the type 1. This might be why you're struggling between, am I a 1 or am I an 8? You might be a preserving 8. This type tends to be very protective, very grounded, and very resource focused. They prioritize safety, stability, and providing for their people, whether that's their family, their team, the organization. I want to make sure that I'm taken care of, but also the team. So you hear a little bit of 6 in that as well. Typically what I have seen is that if there is somebody who's struggling between, am I an 8 or am I this other type? Most of the time, what I have seen, this is purely anecdotal, right? So take this with a grain of salt, because I doubt that it is 100% true 100% of the time. But most of the time, I have seen in my personal experience that you're probably not the 8. You're probably the other type that you think you are, because 8s out of all the types just have a tendency to be, it's like, I could not be any other type. Like, maybe I can see myself here and there in some of the others, but there's no other type I could be. Like, this is me. It's just so clear. And a lot of times on their initial Enneagram Institute assessments that we'll use for our paid our groups, the paid assessment, it's the distinction between the type 8 being the first one and then whatever the second one is. There's usually quite a gap. Again, not all the time, but just something to consider if this happens to be one that you're torn between. Our navigating 8s, they are focused on power, striving to feel powerful through group dynamics, through group influence, through leadership, and they are highly aware of who holds the authority, who really holds the authority, not just the title on your business card, and then how to move systems, kind of understand how to navigate, have influence within those dynamics. And then lastly is our transmitting eight. So this type I think is going to be the most textbook eight out of all the three types. This is the type eight that you probably see in a lot of the Instagram carousels or in a lot of the Enneagram introduction books, where they have a big presence, they have bold energy, and then they just have they have charisma, kind of commanding charisma, like they just confidence. And they can be incredibly charming. They can be incredibly warm-hearted, fun-loving. All of these types can be, all of these type eights can be. And I don't think that eights get recognized for that as much, but definitely here with our transmitting, you're going to see that these are your kind of your most natural leaders. You might see a lot of founders as transmitting type eight, a lot of people who are making big things happen in the world, whatever that might be. And then as we wrap it up and look at kind of growth opportunities for our type eights, very high level, we're going to look at the resource points, the arrows. And so for our type 8, they have a connecting point to the type 2, striving to feel connected, and an arrow to the type 5, striving to feel detached. Interestingly, the type 2, striving to feel connected, is the type that they tend to neglect the most because that connection requires a level of vulnerability that they are not always comfortable with. Ironically, with all of these, there is so much growth within that neglected arrow. And so they cannot become a 2, but look for ways to pull in care and maybe soften some of that directness. Still be direct, but is there a way to soften it, finesse it to the person on the receiving end so that you're really leading with compassion and not only strength, and you're checking in on people emotionally, mentally, maybe physically. You're just checking in on people, not simply operationally or not simply looking at we're taking action. You're bringing those people along and you're making sure everybody's okay along the way. The other resource point is our striving to feel detached at the point 5. And sometimes this is known as their stress arrow in other Enneagram literature, where when a type 8 has tapped out all of their coping mechanisms, defense strategies as a type 8, they will move to what awareness to action calls the supporting point, where it's okay, now I'm going to use kind of the stress managers, the coping mechanisms of the type 5 now. And so that might look like an 8 pulling back, withdrawing, getting quiet, wanting to be alone, but also, so that's kind of an indicator if you're stressed, or maybe your type 8 teammate is stressed, looking like that. But then there's also a lot of opportunity to pull in that pause and that perspective, maybe a little bit more thinking before you leap, that the type 5 is so good at. So this might look like slowing down some of your decision making when needed, right? Not all the time, but there might be times when there needs to be slowed down a bit. And then gathering input, whether that's additional information, maybe that's input from the team, thoughts, opinions from the team before taking action. So I heard something a while back that said power includes restraint. So power isn't always pushing outward. It might also look like that restraining, thinking before you jump into action. So as always, we do a little quick experiment with how to start to apply the information today, the insights today into your day-to-day as a type 8 or as a supportive teammate to a type 8. And if you happen to be an 8, some things to consider to experiment with is asking for input before making that final decision. Even if you already know what you're going to do, even if you already know the answer, it really does make people want to follow you. You can be that much more influential when people feel seen and heard and really cared about. And then also letting someone else lead and supporting them from the sidelines. It's going to come so natural to you. I think this is a challenge that threes might also have, where it's like, listen, I can do it faster. I can do it better. Let me just do it. I'll just do it real quick. But you know, like we've talked about with the 3, same thing here. You can be that much better of a leader, be that much more powerful as a leader, powerful as a teammate when you allow others to lead, and you're, continuing to support them. If you happen to work with a type 8, we've talked about some of this already, but just as a recap, remembering to be honest and straightforward as much as possible. And for some of you, it might feel incredibly uncomfortable. 8s are really going to appreciate it. And I doubt that you're going to say anything that is just so offensive or so rude. Like, you are going to deliver that feedback, that direct feedback, most likely with just so much care. And so just know, they really appreciate it when you're able to be straightforward. The 8s will have some things to work on with how they are perceived by others, but sometimes we can't always change our teammate, change our manager. And so as a non-type 8, working with a type 8, just kind of remembering that intensity doesn't necessarily mean anger. And so while it might feel like they're angry or upset, they just might be really passionate. And so that's a great time to ask some clarifying questions, and then understand that most of the time, that intensity, that directness, what might seem as that challenging behavior, really comes from a place of protection, protecting themselves, protecting the important people in their inner circle, not necessarily dominance, not because I'm on a power trip. So that might help receive some of the messages that your type 8 teammate is giving to you as well. So with that, our 8s bring a ton of courage. They are protectors of the team, of the organization. They are incredible leaders under pressure, which there's a lot of things to be under pressure about these days. And they can handle it. So if you work with a type 8 and notice one of these strengths that we talked about, and you see it in them, let them know. Say, hey, I listened to this podcast. I heard that the 8s do this. I really thought about that, and I see this in you. And specifically when you did this thing last week, I really appreciated it, or I really see that in you. So as much as you can. And then if you're a type 8, giving yourself credit, leaning into the strengths that you already have, and then looking at, maybe it's just one way, either from the point 2, striving to feel connected, or the point 5, striving to feel detached, where you're slowing down that decision making, or at the point 2, you're bringing people along with you. Just thinking about what might that look like for me specifically. That's pretty general advice that I gave, but how could you make that specific to you, either as a leader or as a teammate? We will be looking at our type 9s next and closing out this series. If you happen to be a type 8 and you feel like, oh, I wish she would have said this, or, I don't know if she got that right, or here's a funny story, or I work with an 8 and here's a tip that other people can learn from. I always love to hear from you. And if you're okay with it, we'll share it in future episodes. So let me know those comments over at enneagrammba.com/contact, and just drop your feedback or your question into the text box, and we can talk more about it. As a reminder, we are booking conference events all the way out right now until the summer, early fall, as well as team and department workshops. So I'm going to invite you to keep Enneagram in mind and start to understand some of our style, the way that we run a workshop. You can start to learn more over at enneagrammba.com. And with that, thank you for being here, and we'll hopefully see you back for the next one, looking at type 8s or type 9s who are striving to feel peaceful.